Welcome to the place. I think this is going to be a very interesting conversation. I think this is going to be a very engaging video for me as a Christian and for you as an atheist, in which I refuse to argue or debate with atheists about the existence of God. I want to talk about pornography because, as you already know about me, because you officially know that I'm a Christian if you didn't already know that, is that I absolutely believe that pornography is immoral. But let's not camp out there. Okay, let's translate the word immoral or sinful. Let's translate that word into more of a universal word that is not bound by the restrictions of religion. Instead of sinful or immoral, I want to use the word psychologically destructive. That's the word that I want to use. That's the conversation I want to have with you. Okay? So here's what I'm asking. As an atheist, could you agree with me that pornography absolutely can be psychologically destructive? Because here's how I feel, especially our culture teaches. Like, whether it's American culture, whether it's worldwide culture, people are not willing to admit that pornography is psychologically destructive. People just, that's just something people do. That's just their thing, whatever. But see, here's the thing. Now more than ever, especially men, and the majority of atheists watching my atheist videos are men, because the majority of atheists, especially in America, are men who used to be Christians. I recognize that. So therefore, if you're watching this video, you're likely male and you likely can relate to me on this topic of pornography. And you can be a judge for yourself. But specifically what I want to know is, in general, how do atheists feel about pornography in conjunction to it being psychologically damaging? Okay? So, and I say atheists in general, but I mean you, the individual atheist that will leave a comment. Because when I collect individual comments from atheists, it helps me see the whole spectrum and see the general view, the general cultural perspective of that. So I feel that our culture in general teaches that pornography is okay. It's specifically not immoral, because it's only Christians saying that pornography is immoral, right? I mean, I feel that no one else is saying this. That's how I feel. Fundamentally, it's wrong. It's funny because I think that with Christianity, things are just put in a list of like, this is sinful, this is not sinful, so don't do the sinful things. Why? Because God doesn't like it or whatever. No, for me though, I ask why. And so, why is pornography a sin, but specifically why is it destructive? How is it destructive? How is it psychologically harmful? Okay, so here's what I'm saying. There's never been more access to pornography than there is right now, simply because you can get it right here or your computer. Obviously, you have to put a little like sticker above the camera, to make sure no one's recording you, I guess, right? There was an episode of Black Mirror about that, right? But pornography has never been this accessible. Think back in the, 100 years ago, what was pornography? Like a drawing? There were certain photographs, but getting your hands on that or whatever, right? 1950s, okay, finally Playboy's here, right? And it was that way for many decades. And then finally the internet happens and then people could go to websites, but now even teenage boys can just get pornography right here. Okay, so with that being said, there's never been more access to pornography at any time than there is right now. Now, can we be willing to admit that that's got to have an effect, especially on younger men, teenage boys? It's got to have an effect when he's got access to pornography. And he's still at a point in his youth where he is understanding how the world works. He's still trying to form relationships. He's still trying to understand how his body is wired physically and how he feels about that girl. But yet, he has access to all this pornography. He becomes addicted to it. And it's difficult for him to actually connect to a human being in any kind of relationship level because of that. And then what happens is, you probably weren't ready for me to say this, but here we go. What happens is he becomes so adjusted to the pornography, and you know what I mean when I say use pornography. I'm not just saying that he looks at it, right? I'm talking about what he's doing while he's looking at the pornography. And I'm assuming it's a video or a picture on his phone or computer, right? So in the act of doing that while he looks at this pornography, eventually it gets to the point where it takes more to excite him. So that by the time this guy's now in his 20s and actually trying to have, ongoing relationships with a female, it takes so much to get him riled up because of all the pornography he's consumed that it's hard to actually be involved in an actual relationship. Now, surely we can admit that this is happening, and it's never been able to be this bad until now that we live in. There's a Black Mirror episode about it. There's actually more than one about pornography, but most specifically, is called Striking Vipers, I think is the name of it, on Netflix, Black Mirror. And they address this. These two guys end up going into this video game world and living out these pornographic fantasies. And yet, meanwhile, they not only psychologically but physically cannot perform with a woman because of how adjusted they are to the pornography that they live in. I don't think that that's that much of a stretch from where we actually are in reality, especially because when you think of this generation of men, like, put it in perspective. Again, even my own generation, I've got my 20th high school reunion coming up in less than 2 weeks, okay? Born in 1981. Even in my generation, if you're a teenage boy and you wanted pornography, you still pretty much had to go get a copy of a magazine or something like that. Granted, when I turned 16, the internet was born, but still that's not comparable to now when anybody can get pornography at any time very easily on their phone or computer. There's no comparison. What I'm saying is, modern generation of boys that are becoming men now, over the last 8 years specifically, when everyone has a smartphone and pornography is so accessible, can we admit that that generation is more likely to be psychologically damaged from pornography abuse specifically? Because that's the thing. How much porn is too much? Well, there's no answer to that. It could be a daily thing, it could be a weekly thing, it could be once every couple months, but whatever it is, once it becomes to where it's altering that boy's mind, it can actually have a physical effect on his ability to actually perform. And that's complete irony that it will psychologically damage someone and it hurts their ability to have these relationships. This is a thing that's actually happening in real life. Okay? This is happening. And I know this too because on this channel, a lot of my viewers are teenage boys and they're telling me that they're addicted to pornography. And we know where that leads, that it often makes it very difficult to have a healthy relationship with an actual female. That's the thing that's happening. Are there some guys who can look at pornography and get away with it? Yes, there are. But in general, you put that in front of a teenage boy who now controls it and has never even had any kind of real physical relationship with a female, and that's where he's learning what he thinks girls are like and what girls do like, and then that ultimately years later or however later, that turns into a relationship from that fantasy. And again, this is a fact. It takes that much more the longer you use pornography over time to get excited. So imagine what a strange, dark place, what level he's on in the world of pornography, to where once he actually has a physical relationship with a female. Like, that's happening. This isn't just Christians saying this. This is secular outlets saying this is happening. Can we admit that pornography is psychologically damaging? Can we admit that? And ultimately, this is an example of Christians have been saying this a long time, that pornography is, I know they said the wrong word, they said sinful, they said immoral. But can we agree? And I think even now, people who are willing to have this conversation regularly are people like me, who are Christians saying, hey, this is very damaging. This is being ignored. People are saying boys will be boys and that's all it is. And I'm saying no, it's having effects on the newest generation of younger men. What I'm asking is, are there any atheists out there willing to agree with me on this? Forget the word immoral, forget the word sinful. Let's say psychologically damaging. Can we say that about pornography? That even if it's not that way for everybody, it's enough that it's actually becoming a secretly ignored epidemic. People don't bother to talk about it. Boys will be boys. That's what, it's a very passive attitude about it. I'm not passive when it comes to what's happening with the consumption rate of pornography and how that is leading to those boys growing up and having relationships and treating women. Because so much bad stuff happens when the dad leaves, when the dad was never there. We know this. There's the cliche about it. The person goes to the psychologist and they say, tell me your relationship with your father. Why do they say that in the TV shows and movies? Because when the father is not present or he's abusive, so whether he's absent or there's a negative relationship there, it typically, often causes very negative things for that child. Often it leads to drug abuse. Often it leads to alcoholism. Often it leads to depression and anxiety and all these things because the father. So what I'm saying is these boys addicted to pornography, and they're getting deeper with this stuff, now having relationships with female eventually. How's that for a basis for any kind of healthy relationship that would lead to a family? And I think that's important too. I think families are important. I think that we by default, maybe as a defense, say, well, it's hard for the traditional father, mother, children, same household. That's gone away. That's outdated. That's traditional. But I say, the more that we're straying away from that, the more we're seeing the concept of hurt people hurt people. It's up to young men to eventually be fathers, to be partners, to be husbands, to raise their own children. These are children addicted to pornography. This is affecting not only their own future, but their offspring's family future as well. This is leading ultimately to more of a broken home concept because that boy is going to be broken in here and no one was willing to tell him. Because ultimately, when people start talking about pornography, it gets tagged on the crazy Christian saying, no, that's a sin. Well, not me. I'm the Christian who's saying it's psychologically destructive. And we need to recognize this. We need to talk about this. There are consequences to this. I'm asking, are there any atheists willing to agree that there's some merit in what I say, that we've got this epidemic going on that's being ignored because ultimately no one wants to admit that pornography is harmful psychologically? Any atheist willing to agree with me on this? Comments belong right here.